Okay, imagine this. You have to overhaul the entire education system for a nation of over 1 billion people. I mean, it sounds pretty much impossible, right? A truly massive task, rebooting how hundreds of millions of students learn, think, and get ready for the future.
Well, that is exactly what India is doing right now with its National Education Policy 2020, or NEP for short. This is genuinely one of the most ambitious educational reforms on the entire planet. We're talking about completely modernizing a framework that affects more people than the entire population of most countries. So, what does it actually take to reboot a whole nation's approach to learning? Let's start with why this massive change was even needed in the first place.
So, why the huge change? Well, to put it simply, the old system was basically running on software from 1986. For 34 years, that was the guiding policy. And in a world that has changed so dramatically since then, an update was long overdue.
Now, what's so interesting here is the massive shift in philosophy. You see, the 1986 policy, it did a super important job. It was all about access, getting kids into school using that very rigid 10 plus 2 model. But the 2020 vision, it's all about what happens inside the classroom. It's a move from being rigid to being flexible, from subjects in their own little boxes to learning that's all connected. It's about realizing that the challenges of the 21st century need creative problem solvers, not just people who are good at taking tests.
And yeah, that old system had some pretty big problems. It basically created a culture of memorizing facts just to pass the next big exam. There was this giant wall between arts and sciences, which forced students to pick a side really early on. And all of this created just immense pressure, which led to a massive industry for coaching classes, all revolving around these super high-stakes tests. So what does this new operating system for education actually look like? Well, the NEP 2020 is built on this vision of turning students from just passive receivers of information into active, curious, well-rounded thinkers. The heart of it all is this idea of holistic and multidisciplinary education. I know, it sounds a little academic, but what it really means is that real-world problems aren't just math problems or history problems, right? They're a mix of everything. So an aspiring engineer might be encouraged to study philosophy to understand ethics. A future artist could learn coding to create incredible digital art. It's all about tearing down the walls between different subjects to spark some real innovation. And this is how they're changing the structure to make it all work. The old 10 plus 2 system is out. In its place, we have this 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 structure that's designed around how kids actually develop. It starts with a really strong foundation in early childhood, focused on play-based learning, and then it builds up through stages that are way more in sync with a student's mental growth. All right, so that's the big vision and the new structure. But what does this actually mean for students day to day? Let's break down some of the biggest changes, starting with the one that's on everybody's mind, exams. Yep, this is the question everyone is asking. For decades, the board exams for 10th and 12th grade have been this huge source of stress for students and families. So, what's the plan now? This chart really lays it out. The goal isn't just to make exams easier, it's to make them better and a lot less stressful. Instead of one massive high-pressure test, students might get 2 chances. The whole focus is shifting away from rewarding who can memorize the most towards testing if you actually understand the core ideas. The big takeaway? It's a move from a single final judgment to a much more continuous and complete view of a student's progress. Of course, you can't have a modern education policy without talking about technology, and the NEP 2020 leans heavily into digital learning to try and make education more engaging and accessible for everyone. The key tool for this is something called Diksha. Now, think of it like a textbook that literally comes to life. A student who's stuck on a physics concept can just scan a QR code in their book and boom, an animated video explaining it pops up. A history lesson can suddenly include virtual tours of ancient sites. It's all about making learning dynamic and personal, and it's available in over 18 languages for students, teachers, and even parents. But maybe the single most important promise of the NEP is its focus on making education truly fair and inclusive for every single child, no matter their background or their abilities. And this is also where the biggest challenges are. These numbers, they show a really stark reality. A policy can say it's inclusive, but if a student in a wheelchair can't even get into the school building, that policy has failed. The data shows that almost a third of schools still don't have ramps. A quarter don't have accessible toilets. I mean, physical accessibility is the absolute first step, and there's clearly a long way to go. And the challenge isn't just about buildings. This statistic is staggering. A whopping 65% of teachers say they feel unprepared to support students with diverse needs in their own classrooms. You can have the best policy in the entire world, but if the teachers on the ground aren't given the right training and the right tools, then inclusion is just a nice idea on a piece of paper. And look, this isn't just anecdotal. Study after study confirms it. There is a huge gap between the ambitious goals written down in the policy and the day-to-day reality inside India's classrooms. Which brings us to the final, and let's be honest, the most crucial question of all. Can this incredibly ambitious vision actually be put into practice on such a massive scale? This is what experts call the policy-practice gap. The policy promises all this funding for ramps, teacher trainings, special resources, but the reality on the ground is that in several states, more than 40% of the money set aside specifically for inclusion just goes unspent. And that points to huge bottlenecks in the system. Maybe it's complex paperwork, a lack of local planning, or just administrative delays. Whatever it is, good intentions and money are getting stuck somewhere before they can ever become a ramp or a trained teacher. But it's not all doom and gloom. Not at all. There are these amazing bright spots all over the country where local innovation is actually bridging that gap. In Maharashtra, an initiative called Prerna used mobile learning kits and saw a 26% jump in attendance for students with special needs. In Tamil Nadu, a teacher mentoring program has improved inclusive practices in over 60% of its schools. These local successes prove a really important point. The policy's vision is possible, but it seems to work best with community ownership and creative on-the-ground problem-solving, not just orders from the top. So, in the end, the National Education Policy 2020 is this incredibly bold, comprehensive, and genuinely inspiring blueprint for the future of learning in India. The vision is there, on paper. The real test, the generational challenge, is turning that written future into a built reality for every single student in the country.